see you.
Good to see you. I work for Guadalupe in Santa Fe, and I think I know your stance on immigration reform. In Santa Fe, we have 12% of the people that live in Santa Fe are basically undocumented, but most of them are live in mixed families. So some of them are citizens, some of them are residents, the other ones are not eligible. We see that these people are the most victims of predatory lending, check cashing and things like that. What is the light that you see for immigration reform?
Well, I think immigration reform was at a point where it was almost, I think, right there ready to happen. You had leaders in both parties who were willing to take some political risk to make it happen. You had, Lindsey Graham and John McCain and Dick Lugar ready to lead on the Republican side. We had Democrats who were ready, Pete Domenici on the Republican side, Jeff Bingaman on the Democratic side. And then we got into a recession. And historically, as we all know, when you get into a recession, it makes immigration reform of any sort incredibly, incredibly difficult. And so we saw it become a wedge issue in municipal elections in 2009, in congressional elections in 2010. I made a decision very early on in my first term that I was going to be proactive and to see if that might, eliminate it being a huge issue for me in my campaign, and if it was, then we just have to win on that issue. And so I was the only Democrat in the Intermountain West who was in one of those swing seats to actually sign on to both the DREAM Act and the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill as an original co-sponsor. And we were very proactive, and we had a great team in New Mexico willing to say, this is the way we fix the underlying problems and not just the symptoms. The church has been very proactive in New Mexico. The business community's been very proactive. And I think we just need to rebuild that. And as we come out of the recession, people are going to become more moderate and more pragmatic about it. And I hope they're going to look at it from the point of view that I did when I was on city council, when we had these enormous challenges with drug trafficking as well as domestic violence. And the thing we figured out over time was we needed our local police to be able to communicate directly with people with no fear of them being the immigration enforcement agency. It was the only way in places like La Mesa and Trumbull that we could get good community information to actually focus our law enforcement on the worst offenders, on the people who were trafficking and selling drugs, the people who were selling other illegal commodities, the people who were keeping the entire community on edge. And that worked very well, but it takes a certain amount of pragmatism that when you're at the bottom of a recession just does not exist. Yeah.
Hi. Good to see you again, Congressman. And any question I would give you on credit unions would be a softball.
All right.
Because you
so where
are,
are we going with
this? You are a friend of the credit unions, have been a friend of the credit unions, and I think I speak for all of us, and thank you for that.
It's
okay. Now, how do we fix unemployment? What is it that's dragging the economy down and unemployment is not increasing, or excuse me, employment is not increasing as it should be?
There are a couple of things there that I think we need to focus on. One is this issue of getting capital into the hands of people who want to expand and build their businesses. And our efforts to do that have been limited, have been politicized, unfortunately, in many cases. I mean, your legislation is a perfect example of that. If we could pass the member business lending bill tomorrow, it would effectively be a free stimulus plan. No taxpayer dollars, but additional economic activity. That's a no-brainer for me. There have been other examples of that as well. The other thing that we need to do is address the construction sector. And one of the problems that we have there is that historically, we have always made sure that a substantial part of our public spending went to things like infrastructure. And there's a difference in the impact that a dollar spent on infrastructure has versus a dollar spent on programmatic things. And it's not to say that those things aren't important, But when you spend $1 on infrastructure, you not only put somebody to work if they're making a road or a bridge or if they're laying fiber in the ground, but then the private sector has access to that infrastructure. And it does economic activity with that infrastructure that was never foreseen by the people at the city who put the bonds together, or the people in Congress who said we need to build this highway or that rail line. And so we need more focus on infrastructure, and to me, I think one of the ways we can leverage our limited resources is to create sort of an infrastructure bank that puts together partnership funding where you have bonding and other financing together between municipalities or counties, states, and the federal government. Because in this environment, we need all those entities working together. It's why you see myself and the governor and the mayor all on the same page on investing in Paseo, because we know it's the only way to get things done in this kind of an environment. So I think more focus on infrastructure, which eventually, in the short term, our construction sector is what is holding us back. And part of that has been the housing boom. So many houses were built over time that it's still taking us time, put the mortgage issues aside, it's still taking us time to deal with the excess inventory that we have. We're just now sort of starting to come out of that excess inventory issue. Having other avenues for the construction sector to be able to work in that interim is absolutely critical. And then as we start to build houses again, then we'll see the robust kind of economic growth that we all hope for.
Thank you.
In regards to balancing the budget and kind of tackling our national debt, I know earlier you were saying that we need to kind of approach from both sides since we have such an imbalance, and try to raise tax revenue as well as reduce spending. What we did mention is what do we start to cut? What spending can we bring down?
Well, if you look at what happened last summer, there was a fair amount of consensus that we were going to cut spending, and I think that is going to continue to be the case. If you're looking at the revenue side, there are some fairly simple things that are on the table in terms of rolling back at least the high-end portions of the Bush tax cuts. On the spending side, we're going to continue to have this pressure, and the question is, how do you make sure that you're not eating your seed corn and you're prioritizing correctly, so that you're continuing to fund things like Los Alamos National Laboratories that we know do create additional economic activity, not to mention their contribution to our national security. But I don't think there's a single piece of the discretionary portion of the budget that's not going to feel some of that pressure. And then you have to fundamentally reform some of the non-discretionary pieces. You know, I am not a fan of privatizing Medicare, but I will tell you there are things that need to be reformed within that system, particularly how we pay doctors to create greater efficiencies. Instead of having a volume-based system, having an outcomes-based system. And if you talk to any doctor, they'll know exactly what that phrase means. Because when you pay somebody for each and every procedure, what you find is over time people do more procedures. You know, whereas if you pay them for better outcomes, then outcomes get better. So, you know, we're going to have to look at both across the board cuts and strategic cuts on individual programs within the discretionary part of the budget, but we're also going to have to do some fundamental reforms as well.